Something is wrong with the anger. Not the fact that it exists. Anger is ancient. It is wired into every human nervous system for a reason. What is wrong is the volume of it, the frequency, the way it seems to be everywhere now, in every comment section, every checkout line, every family dinner, every highway, every conversation that touches anything that matters. People are not just frustrated anymore. They are rageful, and they do not entirely know why. Here is what I want you to hold on to as we go through this. The rage you feel, the rage you see in the people around you, the rage that seems to define this particular moment in American life, it did not come from nowhere. It was built, not by any single person, not by any single system, but by a combination of forces that converged at exactly the wrong time, in exactly the right way, to turn an entire society into something it was never meant to be. By the end of this, you will understand why you are angry, why your neighbors are angry, why strangers on the internet will fight to the edge of their sanity over things that will not affect their lives in any measurable way. And that understanding might be the most unsettling thing you have ever encountered. Anger is not a flaw in human design. It is a signal, a biological alarm system that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to alert you to one specific condition: injustice, threat, a violation of something you value. When a boundary is crossed, your amygdala fires. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your bloodstream. Your heart rate climbs. Your vision narrows. Your body prepares to act. This system saved our ancestors. It organized communities. It drew lines that could not be crossed. It was, in its original form, a tool for survival and for dignity. But psychology suggests that this same system has a critical vulnerability. It cannot distinguish between a real threat and a convincingly presented one. It does not ask for evidence. It does not require that the danger be immediate or physical or even real. It only requires the feeling of violation, the sense that something precious is under attack. And in the modern world, that sense can be manufactured with remarkable precision. Think about the last time you felt genuinely, deeply angry. Not mildly irritated, not briefly annoyed, truly, viscerally enraged. Now ask yourself, where did that anger begin? In many cases, if you trace it back honestly, it did not begin in your physical life. It did not begin with something that touched you directly. It began on a screen, in a headline, in a post from someone you have never met, about a person you will never encounter, in a situation that will not alter one day of your actual lived experience. And yet the anger was real. The physiological response was real. The cortisol in your blood was real. Research has shown that the emotional response to digital content activates the same neural pathways as real-world experience. Your brain does not fully categorize a threatening video as less threatening because it is on a phone. The alarm goes off either way. This is not a glitch in human neurology. This is a feature that the attention economy has learned to exploit with the precision of a surgeon. Here is where it gets darker. The platforms that organize your digital life are not neutral spaces. They are systems engineered to maximize one thing above all others: engagement. And engagement, as it turns out, has a hierarchy. Calm content generates moderate engagement. Happy content generates more. But outrage, genuine, chest-tightening, identity-threatening outrage generates the most. The data on this is not ambiguous. Content that provokes moral indignation spreads farther, faster, and deeper than content that informs or delights. It gets more shares, more comments, more time on screen, more return visits. So the algorithm, which has no values and no conscience and no awareness of what it is doing to the people inside it, learns to serve you more of what keeps you engaged. And because you are human, and because your nervous system responds to threat whether the threat is real or not, it serves you rage. Every day, every scroll, every refresh. Not because anyone decided you should be angry. Because your anger is profitable. Most people never notice this. They feel the anger and they attribute it to the content, to the political opponent, to the celebrity, to the group, to the policy, to whatever specific thing the feed delivered that morning. They do not notice the delivery system. They do not question why, no matter what the specific trigger is, the emotional result is always roughly the same. The content changes, the targets change, the justifications change. The rage stays constant. Psychology suggests this is a form of emotional conditioning. When a behavior, including an emotional response, is rewarded consistently, even irregularly, it becomes self-reinforcing. You come back to the source. You seek the stimulation. The anger begins to feel clarifying, purposeful, even righteous. And righteous anger is one of the most addictive states a human being can experience. It feels like certainty in a world that offers very little of it. It feels like identity, like belonging, like proof that you are on the right side of something. And so you return to the machine that produces it. Have you ever noticed how anger tends to find a group? How it rarely stays personal for long? Psychology has a name for this. It is called group-based moral outrage, and research has shown that it operates by a specific and reliable mechanism. First, you are given an enemy, not necessarily a real one, sometimes a caricature, a representative, a symbol of the threat that has been identified for you. Then your group is given a shared language to describe that enemy, shared terms, shared frameworks, shared signals that identify who belongs and who does not. Then your moral response to the enemy is calibrated, not your own morality, the group's morality, and the group rewards you with approval, with status, with belonging, for expressing that morality loudly and without hesitation. Over time, your anger becomes less about your genuine values and more about your membership. You are not angry because you reasoned your way to outrage. You are angry because the group is angry. And leaving the group would cost you more than staying angry. This is not weakness. This is human psychology operating exactly as it was built to operate. But it is being used against you. But this is only the beginning. Because the rage being manufactured through screens is meeting something it did not create, something real, something that was already there. The economic reality of modern American life is a pressure cooker with no release valve. The cost of housing has outpaced wages for decades. Healthcare debt is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in this country. The promise that was made to an entire generation that effort and compliance and following the rules would produce stability has been quietly, systematically broken. And people know it. Not always consciously, not always in words, but the body keeps its own kind of score. And a person who has worked for years and still cannot afford a house, a person who is one medical emergency away from financial ruin, a person who watches the rules change in favor of people who were already winning, that person carries a background radiation of anger that requires no algorithm to sustain. The algorithm did not create this anger. It found it, and it gave it a target. Psychology suggests that displaced aggression, directing genuine anger at a substitute target rather than the actual source of pain, is one of the most common and least examined patterns in human behavior. When the real source of your frustration is diffuse, systemic, or inaccessible, when you cannot confront it directly because it has no face, because it is embedded in structures too large and too complex to fight, the anger does not disappear. It migrates. It finds something it can reach. And the feed, endlessly scrolling, endlessly refreshing, is always there with a suggestion. What if this is happening to you right now? Not to people you disagree with, to you. What if some portion of the anger you carry on any given day is not entirely yours? What if it was seeded, amplified, directed, and delivered to you by systems that profit from the heat it generates? This is not a comfortable question. Because the anger feels real. It is real. The physiological experience is genuine. The values underneath it may be genuine. The grievances underneath it, in many cases, are entirely legitimate. But here is the darkest realization of all. Legitimate grievances can be weaponized. Real pain can be processed through a machine that converts it into something useful, not for you, but for the machine. And when that happens, when your genuine anger is captured and rooted and monetized and redirected, you end up expending enormous psychological energy on battles that never resolve, against enemies that were partly constructed, in service of outcomes that were never your own. You stay angry. The machine stays running. And the actual conditions that produced your pain remain, almost entirely unchanged. The rage becomes its own kind of trap. Psychology suggests that chronic anger, the sustained, low-level state of hostility that has become a background feature of modern life, produces measurable damage over time. To the cardiovascular system, to the immune system, to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for long-term reasoning and impulse control. The longer you spend in the high-alert state that rage produces, the more your brain rewires itself around that state. Your threat detection becomes oversensitive. Your capacity for nuance diminishes. Your tolerance for complexity and ambiguity, the qualities most necessary for solving real problems, erodes. You become easier to provoke, harder to reach, more certain, less wise. And a person in that state is not a danger to the systems that produce their rage. They are its most loyal servant. So what do you do with this? Not a political answer, not an ideological one. A psychological one. The beginning of a different relationship with your own anger starts with a single, deliberate pause. Not to suppress the feeling. Suppression does not work and has costs of its own. But to insert a moment of inquiry between the trigger and the response. To ask before the flood, is this anger mine? Did it come from my direct experience or was it delivered to me? Is this a threat to something I actually value or to something I have been told to value? And if the anger is legitimate, is the target I have been given actually responsible for the thing that hurt me? These are not easy questions. In the heat of rage, they can feel almost impossible. But research has shown that even brief interruption, the act of observing your own emotional state from a slight distance, can reduce the intensity and duration of anger without eliminating its signal. You do not have to stop being angry. You have to start being angry on your own terms. There is something clarifying about understanding the machinery. Not comforting, not reassuring, but clarifying. Because when you can see that your nervous system is being played like an instrument by systems that do not care about something shifts. Not all at once, not completely. But the anger, when it comes, carries a question now instead of just a charge. And a question is the beginning of something the machine cannot easily use. Your rage is real. Your pain is real. The question is whether you are steering it or whether it is steering you. Once you ask that honestly, everything looks a little different. And you cannot go back to the way it looked before.